To make that decision to receive help is not a sign of weakness. In today's world, more than ever, it is a sign of strength.
The last time Prince Harry talked to Oprah on camera, it became one of the most watched TV events in the Western world. And now, just 2 months later, the two have teamed up again, this time for a new docuseries that could stir up even more strife within the royal family. It's called The Me You Can't See. All 5 episodes of the series just dropped on Apple TV Plus. Cassie and I both have gotten a chance to watch it, and it features interviews with mental health experts and public figures who really dive deep, I mean deep, into past trauma to explain how they've all learned to cope. It was amazing.
Deep is, I feel like, a surface level word to use to describe it, Denny. I mean, it is something that I would advise people to just be prepared, because there can be subjects that might be triggering for people, but it is
Absolutely.
very raw, very vulnerable. And you mentioned the public figures, and one of those is Prince Harry himself, who is very raw, very vulnerable. And I feel like we'll use those words over and over again to describe, because that's exactly how it is. This is the most open that we've ever seen him, the most candid. And I feel like as an audience member, we learn things about his past that we've never heard before. And there is a lot to digest. So with that being said, we're going to break down 3 of the biggest revelations from Harry in this docuseries, starting with number 1, which is Harry revealing the helplessness that he felt after his mom's death, which actually drove him to self-medicate. Harry says, "I was willing to drink. I was willing to take drugs. I was willing to try and do the things that made me feel less like I was feeling. I would probably drink a week's worth in one day on a Friday or Saturday night. And I would find myself drinking not because I was enjoying, but because I was trying to mask something." Harry also reveals that things felt especially bad between the ages of 28 to 32, and he calls that time a nightmare in his life, where he was riddled with anxiety, suffering panic attacks around cars and cameras. And Denny, when he opened up about how he resorted to drugs and alcohol, all I could remember was that infamous night in Vegas. And now I feel like we have more context behind how he was running and how he was masking. And that's how he was coping, because he did not know any other way. But he does go on, he does go into further detail for the first time ever what Princess Diana's funeral felt like for him. And I think that was kind of a big shocker for us as a viewer watching, because for the first time ever, we're given insight into how he felt as a 12-year-old boy dealing with unimaginable grief. He said that he was in shock, especially because he had to share this moment of his mother's loss with the entire world. And he remembers feeling outside of his body and being confused that he wasn't able to show any ounce of grief, but everybody else around him was. Everyone else was crying, but yet he wasn't. And these people that he saw crying did not even know his mother. You know what I mean? And so
Yes.
he also says that he was angry that there was no justice. And after the funeral, he decided not to talk about his mom's death to avoid feeling that sadness and more pain and loss. And looking back too, the royal family wasn't talking about it either. So there wasn't this dialogue open to him. So imagine all of those feelings just being suppressed and kept in. When Diana was alive, she was being harassed by photographers around the clock. And, he opens up about how triggering that was for him. He says as a young child, the first thing he remembers in connection to his mother is the daily feelings of helplessness, not being able to protect her. So imagine after her passing to have almost like that guilt feeling too, and then not having that open dialogue, like I mentioned, to be able to talk about it with your family or even anyone in your circle. I mean, it's just, your heart just breaks to hear him talk so openly about this. But Denny, my question to you is, I mean, after everything that we've learned about Harry and his personal struggles behind those palace walls, did anything really surprise you, from this docu-series, or change your perception about him or even the royal family?
I mean, more than anything, I was just completely heartbroken for him. I mean, he talks
Mm-hmm.
about his mom's funeral in the first 10 minutes of that first episode, and there I was, just a wreck. I was bawling my eyes out because, I can relate. I
Mhm.
was literally around his brother William's age when I lost my mother the same way that they lost theirs. So I
Mm,
know what it feel I know that sense of grief. I know that sense of loneliness. I can't
mhm,
relate to having to put on a brave face in front of the entire world, but I can relate to having to put a brave face on in front of your friends, in front of your families, and even after you lay them to rest, really masking it yourself because you don't want to make yourself sad, like Carrie said, but you also don't want to make the people around you sad. You don't want to be known as that
mhm,
person who lost their mother. You don't want it to define you. But as we learn from Harry in this docu-series, that kind of repressed trauma eventually will rear its ugly head because you do have to deal with it.
mm,
It doesn't just go away. And we see him and how much it has affected his adult life so much. And for me, it didn't change my perception of him or the royal family. If anything, it gave me more context and more understanding of how what happened to him has impacted where he is now and how he lives his life. Later in the series, we watch Harry in an actual therapy session working through what he calls geographical trauma associated with the UK. So right there, you start to learn, of course, this is why he wanted to
mhm.
move his family. He wanted to protect them because he felt like he couldn't protect his family, or his mother, I should say. And now he has a chance to do that with Megan and with Archie and their, daughter, their unborn daughter. But he says in the documentary, quote, "It's being the hunted and being helpless and knowing that you can't do anything about it. There is no escape. There is no way out of this." And he says that it was his relationship with Megan that really motivated him to try therapy initially. Take a look.
Only after meeting Meg
Yeah.
did you start the process of trying to figure it out. You hadn't tried it before. No.
And I quickly established that if this relationship was going to work, that I was going to have to deal with my past because there was anger there, and it wasn't anger at her. It was just anger, and she recognized it. She saw it.
Harry says he's been in therapy regularly for more than 4 years now, which was interesting. And I'm glad Oprah made note of that because she said
Mhm.
that wasn't that long ago, that he started therapy. But he explains that it really was for him a matter of having Megan or losing her is why he started seeking out therapy because he knew during an argument that they had that there is some this repressed feelings that he was feeling as a 12-year-old kid coming back up. And so, like I mentioned, his experience of losing his mother really impacted the rest of his life all the way up until now. It's why, speaking of Megan, is the second revelation we learned is his biggest regret just not taking a stand earlier against the racism his wife was experiencing as a new member of the royal family and really protecting her. He said, quote, "History was repeating itself. My mother was chased to her death while she was in a relationship with someone that wasn't white. You want to talk about history repeating itself? They're not going to stop until she dies." And then Harry chokes up a bit, saying, "It's incredibly triggering, potentially losing another woman in my life. The list is growing and all comes back to the same people, the same business model,
Mhm.
the same industry."
And then it's hearing moments like that from Prince Harry where I hope people take a step back and realize that he is human too. He's just trying to
Right.
live his life as normal as possible. And I know that's, crazy for people to even think about. Well, you're a royal, that there's no other option. There is another option, and we've learned that. And that's why when you mentioned that quote a few minutes ago when you said the being helpless and knowing that you can't do anything about it, there is no escape, there is no way out of this. I love how full circle this is now because Harry has taken the power back into his own hands and he did what he needed to do to protect his family, to get out of that situation. And I feel like it's going to help so many people. The only thing that, of course, I'm wondering now is how does this help the relationship with his family? I
Mm,
can only imagine it's going to cause more strain because in
right.
this docu-series Harry does mention his family again, the royal family, the institution, and he even names his father, Prince Charles, saying, Charles has simply accepted the way things are. And that's why I feel like, and I apologize if I'm all over the place a little bit with this because there's just so many layers to all of this. It's like,
Right.
the way things are. Well, no, Harry proved that you can do things differently and you can take matters into your own hands. And, you got to do what you got to do to make sure history doesn't repeat itself. But he
Yeah.
does. he does claim in the docuseries that when he brought up the harassment he and Meghan were facing to his family, he was met with total silence or total neglect. And he says that he and Meghan ultimately chose to put their mental health first to break the cycle for their son Archie, who of course just turned 2, and then they of course have their daughter on the way due next month. And it's just, again, he broke that cycle, and the magnitude that just that has, of course, the hardest decision he's probably ever had to make for him and his family. But from an outside
Sounds like he had no
perspective,
choice.
he had no choice, and he did
Yeah.
what he had to do. And look, it took years to get there, but look how happy he and his little family are now in Montecito, living this life of freedom and being able to now have these conversations that are going to help other people. It's just, it's very powerful.
And I think that's part of the reason why, Harry decided to share his side of the story so publicly again. And it's something that Oprah actually told Gayle King about today on CBS This Morning. Let's take a look.
Being able to express your own personal truth in a way that benefits you and also helps other people to see the truth in themselves, which is the reason why Harry agreed to sit down and have the conversation. And in this series, you will see that we are in conversation.
Yes.
Because he knows the power of story.
And if there's anyone who knows the power of story, but also the power of hearing other people's story, it's Oprah. I mean, she has built a career out of this, and obviously this is not the first conversation that Harry and Oprah have had. And that's the third thing we're really learning through this project is just how much of a tangible bond that these two right here and their work on this project became and what they developed. We all know their neighbors in Southern California now, but as you watch the series, you'll see that they've also built like this safe space. It felt like more than just a sit down interview with Oprah. It felt like these two friends really trying to get to the bottom of why people, or not why people are the way they are, but how what happened to them has impacted their lives and helped them become who they are,
And there were just cameras in the room. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly. Because in addition to Harry discussing his mom's death, we also hear from Oprah. She opens up about her past sexual abuse. So, I mean, the real question is like, how did we get here? Because it really does feel a long time in the making. And we've learned that they shot the Me You Can't See before the bombshell interview that Oprah did with both Harry and Meghan. The series has actually been several years in the making. The production itself took 2 full years and delayed, of course, because of the pandemic. That means that the group of producers, including Oprah and Harry, spent a lot of time together to get this one right. And I think you see it. I think you feel it.
1,000%. And the director of this series, Dawn Porter, she echoed that sentiment that you just said when she spoke to ET's Nichelle Turner, giving us more insight into the production of this. There were obviously shoots and reshoots. I mean, it was a whole thing for a couple of years. And she said that Oprah and Harry were very hands-on every step of the way, which I would imagine. And she said that they were doing what so many of us have been doing during the pandemic, and that was logging on for bi-weekly Zoom meetings. Harry on Zoom. Take a listen.
My kids thought it was hilarious that I was Zooming with Prince Harry and Oprah. We kind of tortured them. I mean, we had them for hours, having just a conversation, because if you have the woman who's the best interviewer in the world and you have somebody who really wants to share, that's where the magic is. There really was not anything off limits.
As we mentioned, there is so many layers to this docuseries. We're only scratching the surface. Another celebrity who gives a super raw, tearful interview about her traumatic experiences is Lady Gaga. We learned so many things about her journey that she hasn't previously shared. So you can learn more about that on our website, etonline.com. And you can watch all 5 episodes of The Me You Can't See starting today on Apple TV+.